huge potential for Africa. So thinking about Africa moving up the value chain, as I've already shown on my other slides, presently Africa is mainly focused on mining, but also some refinement. And you can see here 6 strategic minerals that we looked at in 2024, and you can see the balance between mining and also refining. What we see in 2024 is that this is around $70 million US. What we've done is we've examined all of the pledges, all of the announcements, critically to ascertain, okay, which ones do we think could be viable under good market conditions? And what we see is that Africa could increase their local beneficiation 74% by 2040 in these 6 key minerals alone, out to $120 billion US a year. So there's huge potential there for Africa. We know a number of examples. DRC and Zambia have cobalt and copper. Copper is essential for pretty much every technology in the energy transition. Cobalt, very important for batteries. Graphite is mined in countries like Mozambique and Madagascar. So this could be upgraded into processed anode material needed for all types of lithium-ion batteries. But it's really important that countries think about the ingredients of success from moving up the value chain. So having good partners for investment, skills and knowledge transfer, for workers, robust electricity and transport links for export. So we know that countries want to move up the value chain, and Uganda is no different. So what we've seen is that Uganda has huge plans for their economic development. And what we wanted to do as the IEA is come in and say, we don't want to argue with your plans. We understand that you have these objectives, but what we want to do is help you prioritize them. So what we can see here is that Uganda's power demand in industrial and mineral sectors under the government's most ambitious scenario will reach 10 gigawatts. Now, this is a country that at present has a total generating capacity of 2.2 gigawatts. So what we wanted to do as the IEA was come in and say to them, okay, we understand that this will be a huge demand. We understand that you have laid out in your grid development plan a huge scale-up of transmission infrastructure. So let's work together to see how we can prioritize the key lines that will deliver against your critical minerals objectives, your industrial park objectives, as well as your social objectives. So what we did, and you can see here, this is the minerals map, but we took this, we put it into a GIS economic model. We layered this on top with industrial parks, and also industrial parks that have critical minerals refinement in them. And we were able to go refinement by refinement, looking at the mineral and the particular electricity demand that this would have. And also we brought in generation, we brought in households, we brought in agro-processing. And through this economic model, we were able to prioritize lines for Uganda. So you can see here, this is their business as usual scenario, which in itself has over 3,500 kilometers of transmission lines that need to be prioritized. What we were able to do is say, okay, that's extremely impressive, but these are the 11 lines that you should start with. And they represent still a large amount of financing of $1 billion US, just under 2,000 kilometers. And you can see them here. So you can see the operational lines, and you can see the lines that have been prioritized. And if you know Uganda well, you will know that these are linked to the particular critical minerals areas, as well as their industrial parks. Indeed, this particular line here is actually extremely interesting because this is an interconnector to DRC, which is specifically going to electrify a number of mining operations in DRC. Once we had produced this model, which will be an online platform that the IEA will launch shortly, and also we produced a platform for the government for them to utilize internally, we also produced investment teasers for each of these 11 lines. These aren't pre-feasibility studies, of course, but they arm the government with the information to have conversations with investors. And you can see here, we have included the information of all the different scenarios to not pick one, but these lines deliver benefits regardless of the scenario. And the investment requirement, how it links to the presence of industrial and mineral facilities, and the different business models that the government could consider, be it a merchant line, be it an ITP model, be it needing public sector financing. And finally, we've also been able to estimate the environmental and social benefits. So how many households could benefit from this transmission line? How much emissions could be reduced from switching from traditional means of cooking to electric cooking. So we're extremely proud of this. I'm traveling to Kampala later, so apologies that I have to rush after this session, but I'm going there to launch this work, and it's really something that we hope we can work with a number of other African countries on. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. I'm now going to switch, as I said, to moderator mode. And please, can I now invite our panelists on the stage? So we have, I hope we have, yes, Joseph Kalowekamo, the Director for Energy Technical Services at the Department of Energy, Malawi; Soraya Aziz Monto, the General Manager of the Electricity Regulatory Authority, Democratic Republic of Congo; Robert Vasculian, Manager Energy Africa, FMO; Alexander Lemon, President Makango Rare Earths Limited; and Brian Tahinduka, Executive Head Energy Infrastructure and Mining at Standard Bank. Great. So now I would like to turn it over to the panelists, and as I said, I'm so delighted to be joined by such a diverse range of experts. We have government representatives, both from central government and the regulator. We have a miner, we have DFIs, and also private finance. So I think this is going to be a lively discussion that I'm looking forward to. So let me first turn to our government participants so that we can have that broad overview of the policies and the regulations. So Joseph, if I could come to you first. Malawi hosts significant deposits of critical minerals like rare earth elements, uranium, graphite, and tantalum, and is targeting a large increase in these sectors and its contribution to GDP. So really key to this, I think, is going to be stable and ample electricity. So how are you factoring in the future demand and ensuring an adequate electricity supply, including from renewables?
Thank you so much, Adam, and I'm happy to be here to share what Malawi is doing in regards to increasing electricity to supply mining operations. To begin with, Malawi is positioning its critical minerals sector to contribute up to 20% to the GDP. That's up from around 1% at the moment. So critical in this demand is indeed to ensure availability of adequate and sustainable electricity to power these operations. So we have a target of increasing our generation capacity at the moment from the current 550 megawatts to 1,400 megawatts by 2030. So to arrive at this figure of 1,400 megawatts, we did our demand assessment, which included the demand from mining operations. So the demand from mining operations has been considered in this plan. So there are a number of projects that we are considering implementing to increase this capacity to 1.4 gigawatt. This entails additional 850 megawatts. And out of this 850, about 700 is going to come from private investors. And there are a number of projects, like I said, but key ones, flagship ones, are two at the moment, and these are hydro-based. We have one that has a potential to generate about 360 megawatts. It's a hydro. And then another hydro that can generate about 260. And to this, we are also considering expanding contribution from renewable energy. And we already have 101 megawatts online, grid-connected solar, and we intend to expand this. But the small challenge that we have is integrating too much renewables into the grid when the base load is that small. So in this regard, we are installing a battery energy storage system in the grid, which is going to be commissioned in the coming 3 weeks. And we are also considering integrating in the region. And to this end, we are interconnecting with our neighboring Mozambique. And the line is under construction in the final stages. And if all goes on well, it should be commissioned in the next 4 or 5 months. And we also have on the table at planning stage to interconnect with Zambia and also with Tanzania. So these 2 projects are at feasibility study level. And in short, I would say in our integrated resource plan, we have incorporated the demand from mining, which currently stands at 300 megawatts in the next 3 months, between now and 2028, and then expected to grow to around 600 maybe in the next 5 to 8 years. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you for that, Joseph. Super interesting to see from 1% to 20%. And did you say you're targeting 70% private sector investment? Did I hear that correctly? For the generation, for your future generation. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I said we intend to increase generation capacity to 1,400 megawatts by 2030, and then that means we have to add 850 megawatts to the current 550 to get to 1.4 gigawatt, 1,400 megawatts. So out of these 850, about 700 megawatts is going to come from the private sector.
Wow. Yes, 700 megawatts. Okay. That's fantastic. So let me ask you then a little bit about attracting private sector investment, and what kind of regulatory enablers has Malawi either implemented or you're considering, both on the kind of generation, but then also on the transmission side. So, you know, wheeling tariffs, ITP model, merchant lines perhaps for mining operations.
Yes, so we intend to modernize and strengthen our regulatory framework. So there are a number of things that we are considering, one of them being review of our independent power producer framework, which we've just completed. We had one that was done in 2017, but it has been overtaken by time, so we had to review some sticker issues in that document, so we have just completed that. And then to this IPP framework, there is a standardized template, okay? So it's standardized ideally to speed up adoption and signing of PPAs, okay, by independent power producers. We do also have a grid code that is managed by our energy sector-wide regulator, the Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority, which also guarantees or provides access to the grid by electricity from renewable energy plants. And we also provide for wheeling of electricity in the country, though it is not happening at the moment, but we believe it's going to happen in the near future. And that this wheeling arrangement is going to operate under the Southern African Power Pool, which has got its own principles. So we will abide by the principles provided by the Southern African Power Pool. And we do also have the market rules that guide the electricity market, providing for market models, the single buyer, principal buyer, and even for bilateral trade. So this encourages, private sector participation in the industry. For transmission, yes, our roles are very clear that the lines shall be owned by our utility company, the transmission licensee, but arrangements can be made with private investors to invest in those transmission lines, but an agreement of some sort should be made with the utility company on how they can recover on their investment in those transmission lines. But at the end of the day, the lines are supposed to be owned by the utility company.
Fantastic, thanks, Joseph. So Malawi very clearly open for business with all the regulations that you've put in place, and hopefully we'll see some wheeling operations soon. Soraya, if I could turn to you next and discuss from your perspective as a regulator. So ARE has successfully supported the updating of the electricity law in February last year. How has this law enabled access to finance to increase renewable energy, specifically for DRC's mining operations? Could you give us some examples?
Yes, indeed, we did bring into enforcement a new law from the 5th of February last year. It's a law that I personally defended in Parliament under my previous capacity. So I'm really proud today to be able to show how this law will impact our energy sector. The first thing this law brings is that it has a lighter procedure on obtaining a license to put in place a mini grid or a metro grid, or just to generate power independently from the grid. It makes it easier. The old law was very heavy on that side because they did not envision a scenario where people would be producing electricity and not putting it into the grid. I know it's very hard to imagine today, but there was such a time where everybody thought the grid needs to be expanded. So this new law specifically gives provision for independent producers, but also even to the government with us putting in place a specific agency for decentralized grid. The second thing is it allows for wheeling, but more wheeling charges, and we haven't put in place tariffs, but we are thinking about it because that will really help to capitalize on what is already on the ground while we wait to build new lines. Still regarding lines, we have introduced two new things. The first one is a specific dispatch. So independent producers or private producers like mines can mutualize, can put everything into a single grid, inject SNEL, our public utility electricity, which is very cheap, currently sitting at something like 8 cents per kilowatt. And they are producing at something between 35 and 60, depending on the time of the day. So if you inject SNEL electricity into that grid, it brings the cost dramatically lower. So that dispatch is something that has been brought into the new law. Excuse me. Then something else that we also did is we allowed for specific clients, the big consumers, to have a special eligibility to be able to buy electricity from a producer that is not in their perimeter if the one who has exclusivity in their perimeter cannot meet their demand. That was not possible before. and they just had to generate thermal electricity, even if in the perimeter next door there was electricity sitting. So with this, it's a breach of the exclusivity parameter, but it's a positive one, because it's only when the person supplying where you are cannot meet your demand that you will do that. Now, other things that we are doing to anticipate the future is, first, I was really happy to see what you were doing in Uganda, because that is exactly what we want to do in the DRC. But, and we wanted to do it with traditional partners like Odyssey and Vida, but we want to be specific on special economic zones and mining areas. So maybe this is a discussion that we can have after your advertisement. And then the other thing is we want to start negotiating the PPA right after we've circumscribed where the demand is, as the government, to start already negotiating the PPAs so we can back up our map with a solvable demand. So you come, invest, and you already have a PPA agreement aligned. And maybe those PPA can also be pre-financement to quick start the project. The second thing, and I'm really happy that my co-panelist mentioned it, is regional integration. The deficit currently in just the mining sector is 1.5 gigawatts. That's the deficit to be able to meet the current demand. And we want to double our production capacity. As you might be aware, copper, cobalt, we have the largest world deposit. Then tantalum, with everything happening in the Eastern DRC, it's because of that. We have other mines, though, that are not in those areas. And then we also have very large deposit of lithium in Manono. So most of the critical minerals we have, and in order for us to start exploiting, to start mining those additional deposits, we need another 1.5 gigawatt. So the current demand, to meet the current demand, 1.5 gigawatt. But if we want to increase and to scale up to where our potential really sits, we need an additional 1.5 gigawatts. And then you mentioned transformation. How do we process those minerals, at least partially, internally, before we can export it instead of exporting it as raw material? We need an additional 1 gigawatt for special economic zone and manufacturers. So we are looking at something between 4 and 5 gigawatt capacity that need to be increased very fast in the next 5 to 10 years. And that is not even mentioning the local demand for businesses and people. So the demand is huge. We are putting in place favorable laws for investment in those areas, and with your help and other partners, we will have a very clear map of where the demand sits currently and where we need to invest. Thank you.
Fantastic, and yes, in front of everyone, I will definitely say that we would love to work with you and the DRC on that, so we can definitely pick up that conversation. I had a follow-up on the evolving role of ARE, but you've sort of captured a lot of it there. So if you feel there's anything else to add, please do. Or I could maybe ask you something about the Lobito corridor. And how do you see those sorts of initiatives? You know, we've seen a lot of infrastructure investment coming in, especially from, you know, the United States and other players. So how are you seeing that as something that can really benefit the DRC, both for the electrification of mining, but potentially for other communities, for other industries around?
The Lobito corridor is a very timely program because it comes for the DRC with 2.4 gigawatts that could be imported from Angola, and that will meet part of the demand that we have for our mining sector. It comes in through Lobito, targeting the mining areas, but not just, because every now and then there will be substations to distribute electricity to the community. And that has been integrated in our planning tools in a way that it doesn't disturb the development of independent producers that is coming in. But also, it solves another challenge that we might have in the future, because as you know, we have the INGA project, and most of the clients for the INGA project will be under the equator. So we are talking about Afrique Australe, okay, Australian Africa, so all the SADC countries basically. And those lines that are bringing in electricity could help later on to bring out electricity. So there are critical lines that we'll still need anyway. And maybe something to underline right now is that it doesn't meet the entire demand of our mining sector. It will alleviate part of it, especially 800 of the 2.4 gigawatt that will come through Lobito. 800 of it will go to the local communities. So that already decreases. It might meet the current deficit, but not the scaling up and not the transformation. So there's still room for everybody. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's so great to hear about how you're balancing kind of communities' needs with that of the mining industry. Perfect opportunity to turn to our miner on the panel, so Alexander Lemon. So Alex, maybe you could first just give us an intro to Macango for those of us that might not be aware, and maybe what makes you unique in this space.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you very much to the Rural Electrification Alliance and Ministry of Energy and Petroleum for Kenya, and the EU, and all of the team here who have arranged such a great conference over the last few days. So my name is Alex Lemon. I'm founding director and president of Macango Resources and rare earths business Macango Rare Earths Limited. We've been working in Malawi for 16 years, developing and exploring a world-class rare earths deposit. We're just 2 hours away from the commercial center of Blantyre. And Malawi, as we all know, the warm heart of Africa, fantastic jurisdiction to work in, and is very much going through a mining revolution and very much linked to critical minerals. The critical minerals in Malawi, which are most well known about, obviously the rare earths, which we're developing. There's 3 or 4 world-class rare earth deposits in Malawi. There's also a rutile deposit very close to the capital, which is now being explored and proven up to be the world's largest rutile deposit. As well as that, there's niobium, graphite, and also an operating uranium mine up in the north of the country. The country also, although it's always known as being landlocked, the Nacala corridor has very much opened up Malawi to the mining sector and is a real game changer for the country as far as logistics are concerned. Macango Resources, we're part of the whole integrated supply chain for rare earths, from primary sourced mined rare earth, mixed rare earth carbonate which we'll be producing in Malawi, and right through to separated rare earth oxides, where we're building a separation facility in Poland, in Europe, and also producing recycled rare earth magnets at commercial plants now open in Birmingham in the UK, and opening on Tuesday next week, official opening in Portsheim for our magnet recycling plant, and in the USA in 2027. With regards to the Songwe Rare Earth Project, it's backed by the European Commission. We're one of 4 African strategic projects in critical minerals, and also have the backing of the US government in the form of the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, who are providing technical assistance finance for the project to fast-track the project and get it into production. So perhaps I should stop there and let others and carry on a bit later.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Well, I've got one follow-up for you, so I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet. And thanks so much for that overview, how you're working across the value chain, like you said, including the early stages of the rare earth value chain. What I'm interested to know is how, in your current business model, are you incorporating grid electrification as well as potentially off-grid solutions that utilize renewable energy? Are you also thinking about getting involved in the transmission business? You know, we've seen other miners in other countries for merchant lines, perhaps. I mean, I know we've already heard from the government there that there's a central utility that would own the lines, but is that something you would support on? Do you see a need for that, and access to finance? How could that work in that situation?
Okay, thanks, Alan. Interesting questions, and are very much covered to some extent by Joseph earlier, and fully agree with what he was saying with regards to Malawi. Malawi has been very challenged with electricity supply. There isn't enough electricity in the country. However, there's change afoot. And fortunately, there's some fantastic new hydroelectric projects taking place. The key one being Mapata Manga, which is approximately 350 megawatt addition to the grid. This is in the south of Malawi, relatively close to our project. It's also got interconnectors now. I believe the Mozambique interconnector is soon to be connected up. And also there's an interconnector with Zambia as well. I've already mentioned the Nacala corridor, and one would hope that that would also help assist bring in power as well into the country along that railway line. For us as a mining project, we need considerable amounts of energy and power. We're a company that believes in value add in Malawi. We're carrying out full beneficiation in country, and we're producing a chemical product. We're producing a mixed rare earth carbonate. And to do that, we have to build a hydrometallurgical plant, which is similar to the hydrometallurgical plants in DRC or in Zambia, where copper cathode is being produced. 25 megawatts is a huge amount of power for one mining project. We're going to need a 95-kilometer high-voltage power line, which can supply stable power to the project. So we're working very closely with Malawi Eskom and the Ministry of Mines and Energy to try and fast-track that high-voltage power line, and very interested to see how investors and development banks and funds can come in and assist Malawi government and the ministry and Malawi Eskom to see how that can be fast-tracked and put together. With the dawn of the Mapata Manga project, which is World Bank funded and also funded by my colleague next to me, it's a really exciting time for Malawi. It really is a game changer. And with all of these new mining projects coming online, it's the same discussion. You need to have electricity, and you need to have power, and it needs to be funded. So I think the future for Malawi is very bright. It's going to be one of the key African producers of critical minerals in the supply chain into Europe, North America, and Asia. But we need power, and we need the power providers to come in and support the mining industry in Malawi.
Thanks, Alex, for that. A very clear request, and also great to hear that example of how you as a company are working with the government, working with the utility there to deliver power. Now, so we've heard from government, we've also heard from the private sector on the mining side. Now let's turn to the private sector on the financing side. So Brian, if I can come to you with your views from Standard Bank. So Standard Bank sits at the intersection of energy and mining finance, really across Africa. So how do you see demand for clean energy solutions evolving among your mining and raw materials clients? And what do you really think is driving that shift?
Thank you, and great to be part of this conversation. Let me take a minute and maybe talk about Standard Bank, and then we can jump into the discussion. Standard Bank, we are an African bank headquartered in Johannesburg, and we've been in existence for the last 163 years. So we've been here for many years, and we're going to be here for many more years. So we have a commitment to the continent. We operate in more than 22 countries in Africa. So the major mining corridors, major logistical corridors that most of the countries that are doing mining and trading and export, we operating in those markets. So again, we mandated to support. In terms of the bank construct, we have the largest balance sheet in Africa, so we're the largest bank, and we've deployed this balance sheet in mining, logistics, energy, and other sectors. Our strategy is underpinned by the public sector strategy and private sector strategy, because at the government level, you heard from Malawi and DRC, there are a lot of developments, thinking, incentives, and promotional kind of incentives to attract a lot of private sector and dates and other participants into the energy ecosystem. And our role is to understand country strategy or private sector at an individual organization or multiple organization level, and then we align ourselves and underpin to ensure that we drive our strategy and we're able to support our clients. Now, back to the conversation. Critical minerals are very key to the energy transition, and Africa is at the center of all this work. And what we've seen in Africa, it's been pit to port, export of raw materials, and beneficiation, value addition happens out of Africa. We have seen a new, if I could use a word, a new revolution. It is a rethinking, a re-strategizing at a country level, but I could say it's like a revolution where countries are thinking now pit to product. How do we create value addition? How do we industrialize? How do we create more jobs? How do we build GDP growth at a country level through these activities? And because of that, we've seen a huge spike on energy demand. And you'll notice that all the conversations are talking about interconnectors, we're talking about wheeling policies, we're talking about net metering incentives, we're seeing now power pools coming in, we're seeing traders coming in. It's because now countries used to think as individuals, they are now thinking as regions. And if you critically analyze the Southern Africa power pool, it is an example of how they are thinking as a community or as a region than an individual. Last month we had the SADC Energy Week in Vic Falls, and the message was very clear. Each of the countries came, their ministers attended, and they positioned their strategies around how they are going to solve for the energy challenges in their countries. But in every strategy, there was a discussion or an input on how we can do a regional pool, how South Africa is going to generate power, and how the neighbors are going to benefit, Eswatini, Botswana, and others. And the other interesting one was how a country like Lesotho it has a huge golden opportunity on water, and how they're using the golden opportunity on water to influence the regional play in South Africa and the neighbors. So that is also a very critical point on what we're seeing on the energy side. Now, immediately you step into you step out of government policy and you come into the individual private sector. These are entities that are doing the actual mining. There is pressure around carbon emission reduction. There is pressure on sustainability, which is related to carbon, but then there's also the major input of power. There is huge pressure on cost. And we're seeing renewable energy coming in to substitute and play a key role in the industrial revolution, manufacturing, and value addition within the mining ecosystem or community. And because of that, we're seeing huge demand for energy projects at CNI level, where a business is thinking about their own consumption and how they are going to solve for their challenges around the availability of power, stability of power, and the reduce on the cost. But also, we are now start seeing a community of miners coming together to pool resources into one basket to solve for the challenges they are facing as a community, but at the same time, looking at the communities around them. Now, the question now is, as Standard Bank, what role are we playing in there? So I would like to talk about our strong presence and operation in 22 countries. If it's a client in Malawi and they require support, we will be able to support them at Malawi entity as Stanbic Malawi, which is a member of Standard Bank. But if there is a requirement of balance sheet being mobilized from an offshore entity, let's say in Mauritius at a holding entity, we're able to sit at the holding entity in Mauritius and solve for the problem statement in Malawi as a group. So that gives us that level of leverage. The other piece is, if you look at the major mining corridors, major logistical corridors, we have presence. If it is South Africa all the way to DRC, I had the opportunity to drive from Johannesburg to Kampala, and the number of trucks and yellow metal that is on that corridor headed into DRC, oh, amazing. And that tells you the story of the activity in DRC. So now, as a bank, we are able to solve for the logistical corridor between South Africa and DRC, and then also we're able to solve for DRC itself and South Africa itself and any of the players within that corridor. The other part is on the strong balance sheet. Mining capex is huge and it's massive. And what happens is we have bridged our balance sheet as the bank. We've further gone out to the market and have an ecosystem of lenders or people who reach out to participate on transactions either at public sector level or private sector level, where we use branded finance structures. It could be risk mitigation instruments, it could be equity contribution, it could be debt. Then you also have short-term debt and long-term debt. So what we do, we leverage our brand, our collaboration in the sector to bring a universe of financiers or financial players to solve for these challenges. The other part is Africa is unique in its own way. If you are in Congo, yes, you will see dollars, but there is also the local currency. If you cross over to Botswana, it's the pula. If you're in Zambia, it's the kwacha. If you're in Malawi, if you're in Uganda, it's a shilling. Kenya. So what happens there is there's going to be a requirement of local currency capability. At the same time, you have the FX capability. So what we do is we anchor our client with financing and support on FX, which is dollar, euro, and other currencies. But at the same time, we step it down and support them on the local currency requirement. And then any other FX requirement, we're able to come in and support. Then there is the understanding of the sector. We have, for the last 163 years, we've built capacity and capability at individual sector level. So while I look after energy, infrastructure, mining, we have someone looking at logistics, we have someone looking at the consumer and agribusiness, we have someone in the teams, we have critical resources, skill set that focuses on critical minerals. And it is the purpose of this is to ensure that as and when the client comes through and they need a solution, we have an expert we can speak to. Then the other part is our offshore presence. We are seeing a lot of businesses think about how they're going to create a mix between holding entities and operating entities, and you find that because it's more of a balance sheet optimization, debt equity mobilization, and many other benefits that come with that. So what we have an offshore presence with Mauritius, Jersey, Isle of Man. So if you are a business, you're operating in Africa, you need that kind of support, then we're able to house you, support you, and be able to also provide that support. Then the last one is on the Robito corridor came up, and we have seen demand for infrastructure investments at a corridor level. East Africa is thinking about a corridor with the East Africa Power Pool, but also the single clearance at Revenue Authority, where you can clear your goods in Mombasa and you move all the way to Rwanda or DRC. So those corridors require increased demand on energy because of technology. They want to operate 24 hours, so you need reliable, affordable, available power. Then there is both the physical road infrastructure and the virtual infrastructure in terms of AI data. So that, again, pushes up the demand for energy. And as a business, what we do, we collaborate and partner with investors or different programs. If it's European Union, if it is the East African community, if it is the Asian community, whatever programs they are putting forward for Africa. Yesterday we heard about the European Union Gateway project. If they are thinking about driving a specific corridor, we are able to participate. And you can see, if you think about Robito, it is a public-private investment vehicle. It focuses on solving private sector problem statement at SME, but also at a corporate level, which is local and regional. But the big part is the impact to community. So when you think about the 800 communities that are going to get impacted from that Robito corridor, and I would like to just give you an idea. A household in Africa, we have 5 to 8 people within a household. So there is pressure on access to education, pressure on health, pressure on household income for other demands. Now, when energy comes into the mix, you unlock that. You reduce on carbon emission from use of kerosene. You reduce on carbon emission from the clean cooking, rudimentary clean cooking problems. And then we have seen entrepreneurship at household level in dairy, in crop, in irrigation, where communities trade with each other because a household can have a product the other household has. So while there is a bigger play on energy at a corporate and government level, then there is a trickle-down effect at a house level, which is very important, because as you lift the households out of the demand for energy and you help to get the access to the required base load at a household level, it means that you have children going to school, you have less money going to diseases that could have come out of carbon emission, and then later you have the skill set we're talking about. People are educated, they are attending STEM courses, and then later they are the ones that are going to do what we're doing or also work in specialized areas that are coming up. So it's a whole industry, and that's what I'm saying. The best word you can use are revolution, because at revolution there are so many pockets of what's happening. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brian, for that overview, detailed discussion on the specific blended finance instruments that you're using to tackle risk. And yeah, I think all of us on the panel, and I'm sure in the room as well, completely agree with your sentiments there at the end, how we're not only talking about powering mining and industrial facilities, but how that this can be used for households to really transform lives. I want to now turn to Robert from FMO, also from the finance side. Firstly, I think it would be useful for all of us to have an introduction to kind of FMO's approach to financing clean energy in the raw materials sector, and also maybe picking up on that point that Brian just made there, how does FMO really think about working with local communities as well in some of your projects that you're financing?
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think Brian covered already a lot, so thanks for that. FMO has not been in existence for over 160 years, but for a bit more than 70. And one of the main products that we offer and why we are here is country risk. So we accept country risk, and how we translate that is into additionality. So where, for example, Standard Bank, Brian's bank, is not able to come up with the right tenor to match the, let's say, the depreciation life of an asset in terms of financing. That's exactly what DFIs do. So we provide the long-term financing that's needed in environments that can be or are considered too risky for the, let's say, the general commercial banks to be active. And then with the idea, of course, to de-risk and eventually to have, let's say, more capital mobilized into those countries. We work a lot together, also with Standard Bank, also in the energy space, and also in the energy space that actually is connected to mining. One of the key sort of investment objectives for FMO is to invest in assets that contribute to the green energy transition. So for us, that's mostly energy, but also transmission. One of the, and thanks for your presentation, Adam, it was really impressive, but I think that also highlighted the need to have more CRM mining activity developed and across the value chain of mining in Africa and in the African context. Mining is known to be quite reliant on hydrocarbons, so the decarbonisation of the mining industry is hugely important. And what we see more and more is that also mining operations, this is not their core business, right? So to provide energy ideally is done by someone else. There's a growing number of independent power producers that specifically gear themselves towards providing clean energy solutions for mining operations in a stable way. So it's to the maximum extent renewable, very often solar, battery storage, and there's of course also still some reliance on fossil fuels to make sure that the operations can continue. And that's exactly what we finance. That can be both, let's say, as an independent asset, and then wheel with a PPA with the mine, but it can also be in a captive way. So we finance both solutions. As a development bank, coming also to your point, Adam, as a development bank, the environmental and social standards are very important, including, let's say, the broad community support that is needed to ensure a sustainable going concern, not only of the energy asset, but also of the mining company that it's delivering power to. And that's exactly what we, for already 70 years, have lots of experience in, and that's actually also what we bring to the table. Maybe, I'm not sure if I should call it good, but the way that also IFC performance standards work is that even if you invest in a captive mining, in a captive power solution for a mining operation, it is not considered what we call an associated facility. The benefit of that is that you don't need to do a full, as a development bank, we don't need to do a full DD, also not from an ESG perspective on the mining operation. Having said that, mining, at least as far as we know it, is never without issues with communities, environmental issues, so it definitely does not, let's say, go unnoticed. What we usually strive for is to align ourselves to the extent possible with the mining company to ensure, let's say, that the adequate and proper guidelines and requirements are implemented and are being upheld on the ESG side. Let me stop there.
Thanks so much. So maybe just one follow-up, specifically now thinking about your project with cross-boundary energy in DRC, where you supported funding for solar PV and battery storage. I thought, when I was doing the research before this panel, I thought this was such an interesting project, and I really feel that others can learn from this experience. So what do you feel are some of those success criteria for this project that made it bankable, and how can we see more of them across Africa, really?
Thanks, Adam. Actually, that's a very interesting one, and also lots of credit goes to Standard Bank, of course, because they were actually the mandated lead arranger for that project. And it has been set up in a way that actually there's the possibility for both, let's say, the commercial banks to be involved and the development banks, and they both play a certain role. I think it's all about risk and diversification of risk. So one of the key elements of that financing was that it's basically a portfolio approach. Cross-boundary, actually quite an interesting story, but they let's say maybe even 10 years ago, they found out that they wanted to finance C&I business, small and large. But there was a lack of, let's say, good C&I developers. So they basically reinvented themselves and became an IPP, providing clean energy solutions for C&I, including mining. And that's actually what they have been growing. So they've been growing a portfolio in small and large scale C&I across the African continent. And that's basically what we bank on. The structure, and that's again credit to Standard Bank, but also to match their asset liability management, I guess it's actually a mini perm. So it's a 7-year financing. And then after that, the expectation is that there will be a refinancing. And if not, you can easily, let's say, unfold the 7-year tenor into a full payout project finance type of structure, because the whole sizing and structuring of the deal was basically done on a notional basis, 15-year tenor, but then with a hard stop after 7. Yeah. And I think also maybe one element to stipulate is in quite a bit of countries the availability of FX is an issue. That's also in Malawi. By, let's say, promoting more or linking more energy supply directly to mining, you basically overcome that. Because the great thing with mining is that it is, you talk at the end about commodities that are being traded, that have a US dollar value, and that are being exported. And that allows, let's say, a better bankability of those projects for the banks. But it also, of course, allows for the local economy to grow and to get more access to reserves in the end. So it's a win-win situation, I would say.
Please, sorry.
Yes, I'd like to come on that, particularly the cross-boundary project, for example, which I'm quite familiar with. What he just said is very important. Mining companies want to focus on their core business, which is mining. They don't want to become energy producers. So that allows then on one side, the IPP to access critical minerals, because we know, like in DRC, almost 70% of the mining industry is controlled by China, and other countries will come in for the 30%. But through deals like this, they're able to access those critical minerals by being paid in mineral production. So in one part, the IPPs can access raw material, and on the other side, the mining companies will be able to keep that risk away from them, because it is managed by somebody whose core business is to do that. I also wanted to come back to what my brother from Standard Bank said. Countries are building a very strong resilience by working as a community. And that resilience does not just translate into more benefit, as you would think. Yes, of course, benefit is important, but the world is evolving in such a pace and in such an uncontrollable pace that it has become very difficult for mining companies to rely exclusively on fossil fuel that oftentimes will come from the Detroit Dortmunds, if you see what I mean. So they need to diversify their source. Also, in the last 10 years, solar power has gone down dramatically, almost half the price of what it was 10 years ago. And the DRC, when we are talking about this potential in the DRC, we are talking about renewable potential. So we are talking hydro mainly, but also solar. So we are not talking about thermal. The current provision in our policies is that we will never go beyond 30% fossil fuel generation at any time in our energy production. We are currently sitting at 90% renewable energy and only 10% fossil fuel. because we want to grow so fast, I will allow some people to get permit for fossil fuel generation, but we still have a huge potential. So even in other countries, such as Malawi, for example, if we are interconnected with Malawi, even if they don't have those reserves for renewable energy, by working as a community, it becomes possible to decarbonize the mining sector, to decarbonize the industry sector. So the DRC also comes with that added potential of not only having one of the largest markets, not only having one of the largest potential, but having almost one of the largest global potential in renewable energy, which is very critical. And something else, apart from protecting the planet, it's this planet, we have people living there. We talked about the mining communities. One of the provisions in the new law is that 10% of energy generated for industrial purposes, 10% of it should be sold to the local community. So that is a very quick win for investors who want to come to the DRC, because you have a mine that is producing, let's say cross-boundary, I think it's 120 megawatts, if I'm not mistaken. So 18 of that will sit on the side, and I will make a call for proposal for people who want to come. They won't have to generate, they won't invest anything. They just come to distribute and commercialize the 18% that is sitting. Now imagine all the energy that is produced, clean energy produced for large mining industries, and then 10% every time allocated to local community. For the Lobito corridor, it's 33%. So 2.4 gigawatt, 800 megawatt of it will go to local communities. So there's a huge benefit, not only for the planet, but also for people around those projects. I wanted to add that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for adding that. Those really, really important points. I wanted to throw it open now to our audience if there's any questions. If you have a question, please just raise your hand, and then also just say who you are and which organization you're representing. Yeah, please, we got our first question there, and then second here. Okay, great.
Thank you. Hello, Adam. I'm Vinay. I work with SEMA funds and with FMO's help, we've set up one of the largest C&I fund, debt fund in Africa. We have actually, I can talk about from the private sector live experience of what we're seeing. We have supported a mineral processing unit for their solar energy requirements. What we see, and that's in DRC and probably with the only private lender who's come in there, what we see is while the government might be supporting the mines to get that, the association side of the renewable side of it doesn't differentiate. Let's say there's a regulatory authority or a regulatory process that's not yet caught up with where it should be or what kind of permissions are needed. Either they're lacking, or even if they're present, they don't differentiate between a 100 kilowatt or 1 megawatt or criticality of an industry. And do you folks also want to think in that perspective? Could something happen there to move this forward? When you look at the regulatory environment on the renewable energy stipulations or the regulations that are there, they're not evolving with the same pace that you're pushing on the mining side of it or wanting it from the government side of it to decarbonize that sector. That's what we could figure out. It's taken an inordinately long time for them to get approvals.
Okay. Why don't we, because we're pressed for time, so I'm thinking let's round up a couple of questions. So that gentleman right there, you had your hand up, and then the gentleman here, I'll come to, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Stanley Agnete. I'm representing Signify Foundation, and thank you very much for the panel, really insightful. I think given the advent of time, I'd like to address my question to Brian. I think during your discussion, you actually kept on talking about carbon emission. And so my question to you is that given the fact that Africa as a whole continent is so far below the global, if I can say, emission standards, is this something that you seriously take into consideration when actually developing this or financing this infrastructure? Because we're still way below what the other global, regional, if I can say, countries are. So I'd like to hear from your perspective whether maybe sometimes, given the fact that we're so below, we got to put that aside and just think about creating the market, if I can say, the infrastructure that we need rather than always be focusing on carbon emission, carbon emission, carbon emission. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So this gentleman right here at the front, and then we'll do a round of responses.
Great, thanks so much. So I just wanted, my name is Joe Luose. I'm working in taxation, the nexus between energy and mining. So I have a question. Basically, it's just a view, it's not even a question. I'm having an assignment right now on a very similar challenge in the DRC. And my question is, particularly in structuring, I think I'll need to get a view from Standard Bank. I'm trying to structure an hybrid power solution for mining load in the DRC. So I'll be interested to hear how, to approach the risk and scalability of this in other comparable markets. We have spoke about Malawi, maybe South Africa as well. So the second question, it's on the Lobito corridor. So I would also like to get the view for whoever will be able to answer. So, of course, the Lobito corridor is emerging as a strategic export route for critical mineral from the DRC, Zambia. And my question is, how can the energy infrastructure, particularly renewable and hybrid power, be proactively integrated into the corridor development to ensure that mineral processing and transport are powered competitively and sustainably from the outset. So I would like to get, the view of, the expert who are on the panel. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So we'll respond to those questions. So we've got one there, perhaps a challenge that the industry is moving quicker than the regulations, especially in DRC. So I'll come to you, and then Brian, one on carbon emissions. Very valid point that the current level in Africa is extremely low per capita when we compare it to high-income countries. So should that be something that factors in? And then a final comment will probably come. Maybe you could take those two to begin with on the Lobito corridor, and yeah.
Thank you very much. So I understand the energy sector is moving very fast everywhere, and we sometimes have a little bit of trouble to catch up. So what we did is, in the new law that was published in just last year, we made provision for renewable energy law, a specific law on renewable energy that we are still to write, but with key elements that allow people to start benefiting or to start implementing it now. But it's mostly, I'd say, pilot projects, so that we can learn from that curve and then inform the new law that is being put in place. And provisions are just what I mentioned. We will not go beyond 30% of fossil fuel at any given time. So that is just there, but how exactly do we incentivize people to go and invest in renewable instead of fossil fuel? That is not very clear at this point. Will it be through tax vacancies, or will it be through a special type of permit that you can get faster? Or those are not very clear, and so we leave the market open to have that discussion with key stakeholders, and then we will see which idea works best as we are discussing for the new law. So the reforms are ongoing, and I don't see them ending in the next 10 years, but we want precisely stakeholders, investors, bankers to be part of that discussion so we can shape the future together. So I'd say that's the strategy.
Fantastic, thank you. Ryan, I'll come to you for a comment, and then we'll move to wrap up. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. So decarbonization or the carbon emission conversation, it's a live, present, continuous conversation. On projects, it's something that we look at. So for us, it's not a conversation of how much we emit. It's now about how many tools and technology we can take advantage to actually do that carbon emission calculation. We don't need to wait to emit to start calculating. Now, we have an advantage of advanced technology on renewable energy, panels, inverters, and battery storage. If you're using a genset and you're substituting with a renewable energy solution, there is a clear numbers. The numbers are valid. How many liters of diesel you're using and how much you're using, how many hours, and then what are you substituting it with, is that information. So what we're doing is we're taking advantage of available information and technology tools that most of the OEMs and other accelerator players in the market are using to calculate carbon emission and have it as a score. Before, you notice most projects had an environmental impact assessment. So right now you have that, and then you must think about the carbon emission and how much reducing in the environment. But also we're seeing pressure from global environment. Now there is a CBAM policy from European Union. If you're in the agriculture value chain or you're in processing and manufacturing, there's that requirement. So even if you're not emitting, it's a requirement at a market global level. So you need to align to make sure you attend that market. So the market is shifting that to that space. Your comment on projects, very quick. We're seeing a lot of CNI requirement on captive power or embedded generation. These are individual businesses generating power for their own use. So there is no connectivity of the grid from one point to the other. So if your project is that, we can think about how we provide balance sheet to your customer, and then you do the EPC work. Or it could be the client doesn't want the funding on their balance sheet, they want to do a lease model, or they want to do a PPA, a power purchase agreement with you. We can support with that financing, whether it's you or the other side. Then we're also seeing interconnected kind of community-related projects where it is a number of offtakers, and you will come in as a developer, stroke EPC, and you do OEM work. So, operation and maintenance, O&M. So we can also structure that. Then the other one, we see countries with wheeling policies where you can generate from one point and you wheel your power to another location. Then if that's what you're thinking about, we can unpack it and support you. So I think what is important is to sit together and understand what you want to do. Then we can advise you on what would be the best structure and best funding model you need. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. And Soraya, I'm going to come back to you just for the question that we had on the Lobito corridor and the integration of renewables into the grid.
Yes, from what I know about the Lobito corridor, most of that power, if not all of it, is renewable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's coming to be injected in a grid that is mostly renewable, if not exclusively. I think SNEL right now is almost exclusively renewable on the grid. So it's a 100% renewable project, and we try as much as we can to stay renewable. We know we are not emitting as much as other countries or European industrialized countries, but we don't have to go that way. We know that's not the right way to go, so we don't have to repeat that mistake because other people did it and they benefited from it. Okay, it's fine, they did, but today it's not even profitable anymore. You know, there are too many risks involved. It's not a reliable system, depending on fossil fuel if you don't produce your own. It's easier and it's cheaper, as you said. The market wants people to decarb. It's not just because it looks nice. It's not just because we are thinking about the next generation, which is a valid point, but also because it's cheaper today to produce renewable, particularly in the Congo. I don't know about other countries. To decarb their own entire economy, their entire industry, might be more expensive, but in Congo we are just sitting with 20% household connected and a huge potential for renewable energy. It's way cheaper to go the renewable way. So even for Lobito, that is just what we will go with. Thank you.
Okay, great. Brian, one quick brief comment.
Yes.
Thanks.
I forgot to mention, carbon credits is the new gold. If you don't think about decarbonisation or carbon credit or carbon emission, you miss out on the carbon emission, on the carbon credits angle. And what we're seeing is carbon credits are coming in as a big tool to de-risk businesses' balance sheets. You can actually use your forward contracts for carbon credits to source for funding or raise funding for your operation. So again, it's critical because there is another angle of benefit. Thank you.
Yeah, And I would fully agree with that. And I think, you know, especially what we're seeing in terms of Article 6 now with agreements between countries, I agree. I think there is huge potential there. We need to get the structures right. We need to get the partnerships right, but definitely potential there for countries. We have to wrap up there, I'm afraid. I would love to stay here and talk for probably another hour, but unfortunately, we have to end it there. So I want to say a huge thank you to the panelists, to the audience. You know, we've all discussed today the huge benefits that mining can bring. We've heard great examples of, yes, the big transmission electrification projects, but also how we can link to local communities and ensure that those benefits are shared around. The key role that policies play, yes, they're in place, yes, they're being improved over time, and of course, the crucial role that private sector finance plays, but also DFIs in creating those blended structures to de-risk projects. So I leave this panel certainly very, very hopeful for the future, and I hope you do too. So wish you a very good afternoon and a great lunch as well. So thank you very much, everyone.